Max leaned back against the cool interior of his cryopod, his eyes fixed on the screen of his survival tablet. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the system's clock. The date was unmistakable, 14,239. A sharp breath escaped him. 10,587 years. The number sat like a weight in his chest, pressing against the growing knot of isolation in his mind. Humanity was out there. He had to believe that. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to push the revelation aside. There was no time to grieve. No time to dwell on the centuries lost or the fates of the 250,000 souls aboard his colony ship. He would hold on to hope and focus on what he could control: survival and communication. Max's plan was simple. Science was universal, and logic was a bridge he could build. Slowly, methodically, he retrieved a stylus and began sketching on his tablet. Using Ava's pattern recognition capabilities, he created crude illustrations of atomic elements: hydrogen, helium, carbon. Next to each, he added their atomic numbers, weights, and electron configurations, layering information with precision. Max leaned back against the cool interior of his cryopod, his eyes fixed on the screen of his survival tablet. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the system's clock. The date was unmistakable, 14,239. A sharp breath escaped him, 10,587 years. The number sat like a weight in his chest, pressing against the growing knot of isolation in his mind. Humanity was out there. He had to believe that. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to push the revelation aside. There was no time to grieve, no time to dwell on the centuries lost or the fates of the 250,000 souls aboard his colony ship. He would hold on to hope and focus on what he could control: survival and communication. Max's plan was simple. Science was universal, and logic was a bridge he could build. Slowly, methodically, he retrieved a stylus and began sketching on his tablet. Using Ava's pattern recognition capabilities, he created crude illustrations of atomic elements: hydrogen, helium, carbon. Next to each, he added their atomic numbers, weights, and electron configurations, layering information with precision. Ava identified the first few elements with ease, translating their names into Council standard symbols. Each time she responded correctly, Max built on the foundation, introducing new elements and progressively more complex atomic structures. Within hours, they had aligned most of Earth's periodic table with the Council's. Malinar observed quietly from the observation deck. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the human as he worked, his focus absolute. Her empathic senses were bombarded by his emotions, the faint flickers of hope under layers of determination, the frustration of trial and error, and the cautious curiosity that kept him pushing forward. "Ava," Malinar asked softly, "what's he doing?" "Max Williams is establishing a shared knowledge base in science," Ava replied, her voice neutral yet impressed. "He has yet to communicate verbally but is rapidly aligning atomic data with our periodic standards. While his knowledge is extensive, his periodic table lacks certain elements unique to Council discoveries. He appears to be using this as a foundation for broader communication." Malinar blinked in disbelief. "He's building a lexicon from science alone?" "Correct. It is an unconventional approach. Most species prioritize language or symbols, but Max's methodology is efficient for long-term comprehension." As the hours passed, Max shifted his focus to mathematics, using atomic numbers as the basis for defining numerical values. He built simple equations and patterns, progressing to complex mathematical functions, geometric shapes, and visualized formulas. Ava mirrored his progress, her algorithms interpreting his intentions. By mid-morning, Max pivoted back to chemistry, testing Ava's ability to recognize compounds. Progress slowed as he hit a wall. The AI struggled to interpret his intent when illustrating molecular bonds. Unfazed, he adjusted, reinforcing the mathematical groundwork and interweaving it with scientific principles. Around midday, Ava reported her findings to Malinar. "The subject has begun integrating Council standard numerical systems into his device. He is creating a cipher to enable faster and more seamless data exchange between us." Malinar's brow furrowed as she watched Max's deliberate motions. "He's building a cipher? From scratch?" "Correct," Ava confirmed. While the first 3 attempts failed due to inconsistencies, he has adapted his approach with remarkable efficiency. His understanding of programming is highly advanced, rivaling our own council engineering methodologies. Unbelievable, Malinar murmured. Cabo's voice cut through their discussion, sharp and skeptical. Are we certain this is just raw intelligence and not pre-programmed behavior? He could be a danger, maybe even a spy. Ava responded, unperturbed by Cabo's tone. My analysis shows no signs of pre-programming or implanted behavior. Max's actions indicate adaptive problem-solving, not automation. His methods suggest years of study and application. Cabo grumbled but said nothing more. Max, still working tirelessly, barely registered Malinar's presence until a faint hum drew his attention. A holographic interface materialized before him, projected by Malinar's activation of the ship's environmental systems. The sudden display startled him, but after a moment of hesitation, he approached the hologram with cautious curiosity. Using both the holographic interface and his tablet, Max began multitasking. On the hologram, he constructed complex 3-dimensional models of elements, compounds, and molecular structures. At the same time, he used the tablet to refine the cipher he was building, comparing data between the 2 systems in real time. Malinar was left speechless. The way Max moved between the systems, seamlessly integrating them into his workflow, was astonishing. She had suspected the human was intelligent, but this was beyond her expectations. He's multitasking, Malinar said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. Not just adjusting the data, but rethinking it, rebuilding it as he goes. Ava, is this normal for his species? Unknown, Ava replied. However, his methodology is highly unorthodox compared to the Council's standard approach. It prioritizes meaning over direct linguistic translation. If perfected, it could revolutionize how we integrate new species into the Council. Malinar shook her head, her empathy picking up faint traces of frustration and satisfaction emanating from Max. He's trying to meet us halfway, she realized. He's not just solving problems, he's creating a way for us to understand each other. As the cycle drew to a close, Max's progress was undeniable. His cipher had reached its 4th iteration, and while still imperfect, Ava noted significant advancements. The holographic display was now populated with a wealth of information, a shared repository of scientific and mathematical knowledge that had grown exponentially since the morning. For Max, the day's work had been grueling but rewarding. Every calculation, every model, every equation was a step closer to understanding these aliens and their world. He didn't know if humanity was still out there, but he had to believe that forging this connection was the first step to finding out. For Malinar, the day was one of revelation. She had seen intelligence before, even brilliance, but this was something different. Max wasn't just adapting, he was innovating, creating pathways of understanding that hadn't existed before. Captain, Malinar said quietly as she watched Max continue to work. I think we've underestimated him. Cabo's voice was gruff but laced with begrudging respect. We'll see. And as the faint hum of the ship filled the silence, Max kept going, driven by a singular hope, that he was building more than just knowledge. He was building a bridge. Chapter 4. Opening the Vault. Max sat motionless in the dim light of the isolation habitat, the faint hum of the ship's systems resonating through the air. His cryopod was still his anchor, a physical reminder of the fragile thread tying him to his past. Exhaustion tugged at him after the night's relentless work, but he couldn't stop now. The tablet rested on his lap, the data set carefully curated and compartmentalized. Every byte he authorized had been combed through with meticulous precision. Any hint of Earth's stellar location, humanity's star maps, or navigational patterns was scrubbed. Even the images of Earth's night sky had been subtly altered. His fingers hovered over the interface as he glanced at the file flagged as entertainment. He couldn't risk sharing it. Humanity's idea of fun could easily be misinterpreted. Violence in action films, war stories, and even absurd comedy could paint a distorted image of who they were. With a tight swallow, he locked the file, adding a small note for Ava. Complex, nuanced, and potentially overwhelming without context. With one final exhale, Max initiated the 12th iteration of his cipher. Ava's hologram materialized on the bridge moments later, flickering faintly before stabilizing. Her humanoid figure glowed softly as she turned toward Malinar and Cabo. "I have access," Ava announced, her voice laced with astonishment. "Max Williams has authorized approximately 205 exabytes of data for translation and analysis." Cabo's massive form leaned forward in his command chair, his ursine features set in a skeptical scowl. 205 exabytes? From that primitive device of his? "Yes, Captain," Ava replied. "The data repository contains extensive information on Earth's scientific fields, historical records, cultural data, and more. However, I found no references to Earth's stellar position, navigation charts, or astrological systems. One file, flagged as entertainment, remains inaccessible under a self-imposed restriction by Max. He stated that humanity's entertainment is complex and nuanced." Ava's tone turned dry. "Though, Captain, I suspect you would label it barbaric and savage." Cabo snorted. "No need to guess. Deathworlders often indulge in violent excess, even in their leisure." Malinar crossed her arms, her silvery fur bristling slightly. "Perhaps we should refrain from judgment until we fully understand their context." She turned to Ava. "Is the lexicon complete?" "Not yet," Ava admitted. "The volume of data has accelerated the process, but humanity's linguistic diversity is staggering. There are thousands of languages, each with unique syntax, tonal variations, and cultural nuances. The cipher is translating his code to ours with 96.2% accuracy, but the lexicon requires more time. Max has also begun manually inputting additional data, syntax rules, tonal cues, cultural gestures, and micro-expressions. If undisturbed, the translation accuracy could exceed 80% for English to Interstellar Common within days. However, the reverse translation will require further input from our end." "Always 1,000 tongues," Cabo muttered under his breath. In the isolation habitat, Max remained absorbed in his work, the holographic interface casting a pale glow across his focused expression. His hands moved swiftly, toggling between inputs on the hologram and his tablet. The data streams coalesced into intricate webs of syntax and context, each thread building toward mutual understanding. Unbeknownst to Max, Malinar watched from the observation window. Her empathic senses stretched cautiously toward him, brushing against the emotional currents that radiated from his being. What she felt stopped her in her tracks. Isolation. It wasn't the sharp, immediate pang of loneliness, but the deep, aching kind, heavy and constant, like the gravity of a planet. Beneath his outward focus and meticulous precision, Max's emotions were suffused with a quiet but profound longing. For what? Malinar could only guess. Connection, familiarity, or perhaps just the sound of a human voice. Her chest tightened as she stepped back from the window. It wasn't pity she felt, but a growing determination to bridge the gap between them. "Captain," Malinar said later in the briefing room, her tone calm but firm, "I believe Max's actions are driven by his isolation, not hostility. He's working tirelessly to communicate, to understand us. This is not the behavior of someone with malicious intent." Cabo regarded her with narrowed eyes. "Or it's the behavior of someone hiding their true intent behind a facade of cooperation." Malinar took a steadying breath, keeping her voice level. "Ava has found no evidence to support your suspicions. Every action he's taken suggests he is alone, stranded, and doing what he can to survive. Shouldn't that merit at least some trust?" Cabo leaned back in his chair, the glow of the hologram reflecting in his dark eyes. "Trust is earned, not given, especially with a Deathworlder." Malinar frowned but held her tongue. She knew pushing the captain further would only harden his stance. As the ship's cycle shifted to evening, Ava continued to process the wealth of information Max had shared. Her calculations grew increasingly precise as the cipher smoothed the translation process. "Max's methodology is unconventional but effective," Ava noted to Malinar during a quiet moment. "He prioritizes meaning and context rather than direct linguistic translation. This approach has accelerated comprehension across multiple domains, including science, mathematics, and cultural studies." Malinar nodded, her thoughts drifting to the human still hunched over his work. "He's trying to build something," she said softly. "Not just understanding, but a connection." Ava regarded her for a moment. Your assessment aligns with his observable behavior. He works with relentless determination, driven by a need to overcome his isolation. Back in his habitat, Max rubbed his eyes, fatigue tugging at the edges of his focus. The data streams on the hologram were beginning to take shape, pieces of his language threading together with theirs. For the first time since waking in this alien ship, a glimmer of hope flickered in his chest. He wasn't there yet, not by a long shot, but he was closer, and for now, that was enough. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.